I love that question. And I thought about it for a little bit here, and it just all coalesced around the word attribution. And I can just
love it. Hello and welcome to episode 32 of Rockstar CMO FM. The M is for marketing, the F is for, well, you decide. As you're probably asking yourself, does the world need another effing marketing podcast? I'm your host, Ian Truscott, founding editor of Rockstar CMO, your monthly dose of marketing street knowledge. You can find us at rockstarcmo.com or at Rockstar CMO on Twitter and LinkedIn. And you can also find all the past episodes of this show and the show notes at rockstarcmo.com/podcast. This episode was recorded on Friday the 16th of October. Thank you for joining me and my guests on our little show. I hope you've had a good week. I hope you're well and are staying as safe and as sane as you feel you need to be. This week, I have a thought. I chat to Grant Johnson, CMO of Emburse. And again, I retire to the virtual Rockstar CMO bar with my friend and content marketing guru, Robert Rose, for a cocktail and a chat. Right, let's get started, shall we? This week, I'm not dipping into the page of Rockstar CMO, although obviously I would recommend you do so. There's some excellent stuff over there. I just want to share a quick thought, something I observed this week, as I'm keen to get on with the interviews, as I have two excellent conversations to share with you. Obviously, my contribution's terrible. The guests are excellent. Once upon a time, I was heavily into reading blogs via my trusty RSS reader, Google Reader. Checking in on over 100 or so feeds I'd collected on content management and marketing over the years. It was part of my morning routine that's been replaced with checking in on LinkedIn and Twitter these days. Of course, my reader wasn't so trusty. Google killed it, as Google tends to do. And there's a lesson there, of course, maybe for another episode. And I tried various other readers, settling on NewsBlur, and my routine continued until I drifted away from the habit. This week, not content with how the social media algorithm decides what I'm interested in, I resurrected this routine, curious if RSS was still where it's at. It seems it's been a few years since I opened NewsBlur, and as it updated itself with all the latest posts, I was delighted to reconnect with blogs I'd not read for a while. But what stood out to me was that almost half lie dormant or had gone. So my thought this week, while of course there are great reasons to stop stuff and to be focused, and maybe I'm not down with the cool kids by using RSS for this, I would love to know your thoughts on that. But it seems just keeping going, showing up as Seth Godin describes it, will differentiate you, as many of the people competing for your audience's attention will be stopping. Now, I'm not Gary Vee or Seth, and I'm reluctant to pile in on the, hustle bollocks. But in this crazy year, I thought I'd share what I found to be encouraging. If you kept going, kept showing up, you've done a thing. And you might be a regular part of somebody's day. This is a hat tip to you. Right, I think that's quite enough from me. On to the interview. Grant Johnson is a serial CMO, currently the CMO of Emburse. He's held the top marketing job in a string of B2B companies, including Kofax, Pegasystems, SDL, and FileNet, after, as you'll hear, starting out with Toshiba. Grant is a former boss of mine and gave me my first opportunity to develop this crazy idea I had for creating a content marketing and strategy function within a business almost 10 years ago. As I've said before, this podcast gives me a great excuse to talk to interesting people, but also old friends. And I hope you enjoy this conversation. Hi, Grant. Welcome to Rockstar CMO FM. Thanks for joining me. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me, Ian. Great to get connected again.
Yeah, no, it's good. It's been a few years. It really has been a few years. So for people that are listening to the podcast and don't know you, tell us a bit about yourself.
Yeah, Ian, I grew up in LA, and like a lot of kids in that environment, I was captivated by film. There's something magical about getting transported sight, sound, and motion into this temporal world that is known as the movie-going experience. And so naturally, I wanted to become a movie director growing up in LA. But, when I discovered marketing and I discovered you had a lot of liberty to make stuff up, I kind of jumped in and I never looked back. When I'm not working, I love to spend time with the family, and in COVID times, that's a lot of time.
It's true.
I've got 3 kids at home, and 2 would have been at college this second year. And so, if I'm not on Zoom calls, I'm hanging out with the family. Or as you might recall, I still play competitive tennis on the weekends.
Yeah, I remember.
Fun. It keeps the mind and body active, and it's a humbling experience, but it's great.
You're on the West Coast, right? Whereabouts are you?
I'm in Southern California, Mission Viejo. It's south of Los Angeles, about an hour. Really nice climate. Although, as you've seen, we've had some crazy fires and other things happening in this climate change world.
Yeah. And you just mentioned that the pandemic. And sorry, I should ask you. So you're now the CMO of Emburse,
right?
Correct. And what do Emburse do? Who are these guys?
Yeah, we actually formed the company. It was 7 companies coming together over the last year. I joined November of 2019, and we launched the name Emburse and the company, a new brand, which I've done before, but this is a bit of a unique situation, bringing together 7 different operating units. Emburse on January 16th of this year. And at Emburse, we help make our users' lives and their businesses better. We transform how organizations manage expenses, invoices, and payments. And our mission is to humanize work by automating the manual tasks so we save users time, and they can focus on what matters most, whether that's their community, their family, of more rewarding work than doing expense reports. And we give CFOs the ability to make their employees' lives easier, help them with their work-life balance so they can spend more time not on, invoice processing and manual tasks, but helping increase visibility into expenses and invoices, and simplify payments. And it's a pretty sizable company. We are privately held, but we're, large enough to have 14,000 clients and 4.5 million users around the globe, principally in North America, though we have pretty good presence in Europe as well.
Yeah, wow. I mean, as I run my own little agency and I spend too much of my time doing expenses and tax returns and stuff, which was, I think, my Saturday this week. that sounds like music to my ears. It might be the humdrum stuff, but it certainly makes your life better when it goes well. So that sounds cool.
Well, you can just take this device here, any smart device. Use your iPhone, iPad, Android, and snap a picture, upload the receipt. It gets automatically loaded in the report. And and next thing you know, you get electronic payment of your expense report. So we'll see if we can help you out.
That sounds perfect. And then you just mentioned the fact that you're a global organization. We've already touched on some of the challenges that 2020 has thrown at us, particularly you guys in California. But the pandemic specifically, have you seen that change the way you've been able to work with your global team? And also, what feedback are you getting back from your customers about how their relationship with their customers has changed?
Yeah, I'll take that like as the 2 parts and just start with the first part. And the one of the reasons I joined this is it's great to have been CMO for now 12 years, and this stage in my career, I really look at not just the opportunity, which was very exciting early on, which is the culture and the management team, and we're very people focused. We're a very empathetic culture. We actually I was part of coming up with what we call our core values, called See It: sympathy, empathy, empowerment, individuality, and teamwork. And it's really come to the fore, our people focus during this pandemic. So we first and foremost, health and well-being of our employees. So everybody was like the first opportunity, work from home, work virtually. We already had Zoom, and we were a global, culture, a lot of dispersed workforces. 8
Yeah.
office locations around the globe. And but we've had certain areas like Spain. We have 3 offices, and as you know, like maybe not as
Mm.
bad as Italy, but they had one of the earlier,
Mm-hmm.
more uh, pervasive, pandemic impacts,
Mm-hmm.
and so they had to kind of almost. I mean, they did shut down. In fact, we were expanding further into Italy. We had to stop that. But we also focus on making sure our customers are accommodated and giving back to the community. It's part of our mission to help
Mm-hmm.
the disadvantaged. So we have initiatives going on there. The other thing
Yeah.
that I've noticed, and probably a lot of the other folks you've had talk with on the podcast, Ian, is that you really have to make extra effort to stay connected.
That's
The one
true.
thing to work at home, the other thing is to work from home, as your
Mm.
last guest mentioned, one of your recent guests. And you have to make sure you take time to connect on a personal level. Everything's not just Zoom and digital. How do
Mm-hmm.
you can pick up the phone still?
Yeah.
So we've worked on that carbon time. The other thing we've worked on is we have, like a lot of modern progressive companies, we have an unlimited PTO. It sounds great in theory, but
Mm-hmm.
we have a lot of dedicated folks that they won't
You want
take
to take the
time.
holiday?
It's like, like you're not accruing anything. You're not going to get, there's,
Yeah.
but so, hey, so the other thing we did, which actually was kind of given permission, we came up with this idea. We got a lot
Mm-hmm.
interesting. We've got a lot of musicians. We've got our own band. We call it the Bad Receipts. It's, it's this kind of YouTube thing going on, and
Nice.
Spotify. Yeah, very cool.
Yeah.
A lot of them are from the UK, quite frankly. A lot of good musicians over there. But
Cool.
we have an unplugged day. And so it's a designated day. We pick a Friday and a Monday. We've been doing these like every, other month, every 6
Mm-hmm.
weeks. And because we want to still serve customers and, have sales and operations going, it's not always only on a Friday or only a Monday, but it gives
Yeah.
people an extended weekend and, go climbing, go to the beach if you're nearby, recover
Yeah.
your balance and recharge. And so that's
Yeah.
really helped with our culture.
Wow.
So that's kind of pretty cool. As far as, our mission is to humanize work and
Mm-hmm.
make sure our customers can get through this. So we've done a lot of things to try to accommodate that. If you think about the whole in-person event world, the great
Yeah.
news is my budget cut was really easy because all these events, okay, let's cut back. Great. All these physical events are canceled. So there's a 500,000 plus. And so, but we went virtual. It takes as much work to pull off virtual.
Yeah,
And
it
we
does.
found that with all these events canceled, we had projected, let's say, 100 people per city.
Yeah.
We've achieved double the attendance virtually. And it's great to see our customers.
Wow.
Yeah, it's great that, well, partly because they don't have to travel, right? And so I guess
Yeah.
and we do it for 4 hours, 2 to 4
Yeah.
hours. We're not doing an all-day event like we used to do. And so
Yeah.
people can schedule it in. Of course, it's recorded and all that good stuff. And
Mm-hmm.
we found that with all the innovation we're doing, we have 7 contributing business units. So there's kind of a new release almost every week for something
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
customers are excited about, that they like to hear of how other customers are dealing. We've come
Yeah.
up with some things like virtualizing financial operations. Okay, you got to pay people, you got to support them working at home. How do you do
Mm-hmm.
it? Right?
Mm-hmm.
They're not going to bring in their stapled expense report. So that's been good. And then,
Mm-hmm.
from a prospect perspective, again, like a lot of my peers, I'm on a
Mm-hmm.
couple of peer groups, you find out that you've got to find new ways. These people I used to call it intercept marketing. They're walking a trade show floor. They see your booth, they like your messaging. You get a demo, and next thing you know, they're early enough in their exploration decision buyer
Mm-hmm.
journey that they talk to you. Don't have that happen. So how do you get to them? So
Yeah.
we've done a lot of the review sites, the G2 Capterra. We've done a lot of the intent based. We find those pretty successful, like, based on search criteria, solutions customers are looking for. If we're in that consideration, then we can get some additional opportunities. So we've just had to be, creative and find ways to engage and connect with, customers and prospects.
Yeah, and it sounds like it's working. I mean, virtual selling has been around for a while, right? In that there's a lot of stats from Gartner and Forrester about how much people are engaging with organizations before you meet a sales guy. Whereas when we've been inside the vendor, you don't particularly see that, but we've been forced to see that now, haven't we? We've been forced to virtually sell.
We have been. I got a great anecdote on the all hands call for our sales team, and I won't mention the competitor's name. people might deduce it if they know our space. But we had a multi-$100,000 deal we closed this past quarter. And, when you can't fly to the client and meet them, that's the reality. They can't fly and meet you. And so you have to do virtual selling, as you say, Ian.
Yeah.
But we requested, and the customer, liked the idea that we did all the discussions via some video call. And so they got to know us, our personalities, and so forth. And our competitor, they never were on camera. And it was so interesting because, we had this mission, you and I's work, and we just think we're very people centric in our approach to our business and our customers. And that just stood out to the customer.
Yeah.
That, gosh, these guys are so impersonal. And I think that was one of the strongest intangibles in virtual selling, is find a way to actually connect.
Yeah. And it's funny, isn't it? Because when you do talk to somebody with the video on, and I know that I'm not recording video and we're having a conversation and the video's on, it's very different to when you're only dealing with audio, isn't it?
Yeah, it really is. You can, you can't read body language as well as in person. Somebody leaning forward, their eyes are rolling, but it makes it different. And so, we're working on ways to stay connected in this virtual world.
Yeah, no, that's really, and I love the thoroughness of your response. I think there's a lot of really good stuff in there. But you also touched on the fact that you've been a CMO for quite a while. I don't want to date you or anything like that, but
I'm okay.
This this is definitely not your first rodeo, and you've worked for companies like Toshiba, Symantec, FileNet, We Met, SDL, Kofax. What inspired you? You talked about you wanted to produce films, and that's what got you into marketing. What sustained that love of marketing, and what was the early what were the early opportunities that you had there, and how did that start?
Yeah, that's a great question, Ian. I never intended to go into marketing. I was a liberal arts major in political science. I travel the world, and which I've done quite a bit. I've lived in Europe a couple times, and but I was at this small company. It was the first company that hired me out of college, and it was kind of cool. They had a rotational assignment. So, okay, you can spend some time in operations and finance, in customer service and sales and marketing. And when I went on the marketing tour, they had, for a company that was only 10 million and maybe 125 employees, something like that. They had this really bright creative director. He's visually smart, really could do the turn of the phrase. And, we produced, I thought, compelling materials at the time. And so I just got inspired by that. I said, this is pretty cool. So let me try this marketing thing. And then ultimately, as you've noted, I made this shift. I got an MBA like a lot of folks do. And somebody who had gone to Pepperdine, liked my Pepperdine. It's a California private university, and took a chance on me. I think part of your career, we'll talk about it, you got to get a break or two. And so I got into the big leagues, if you will. And then it was really a case of, how do you find a way to contribute more to the organization? And I just love the dynamic nature. I'm a very analytical marketer. I think I like data and the internet and analytics, and all the big data things really help us with that. But you still have to have an intuitive sense, right? And so that's what's a great combination. I've said before, if you don't like the financial results, too bad. If you don't like the marketing campaign, come up with a new one.
Yeah. No, I like that. I really like that. And is that the advice you'd give to marketers? What advice today would you give to marketers that want to emulate the sort of career that you've had and sustain that in marketing?
Get lucky. I'm partially serious about that, Ian, because I think part of it is, you have to be intentional about your career. I was recently talking to one of my former colleagues. I can't mention the company because they might guess who it is. And he's been there 10 years. And he said, I really admire, your career path. And I was intentional. I can say I had some good breaks, but I thought about, okay, so how did I go from A to B, and how did I go from manager, director to VP to CMO? And I think I sort of had that intent. But the other thing I think is really important, and I learned this probably in my 20s, which is don't get hung up on what you get paid. It's sort of hard to say that when you live in a major city and you're struggling to get by.
Yeah, true.
It's important. I get that, and I empathize with it. But look at the value you create, and it's a just different way of turning the thought process. If you can create more value, the organization will want you to do more. and therefore
Yeah.
you'll be in a good position
Yeah.
for that next opportunity, whether hopefully it's within your company or some other company, and
Mm-hmm.
it'll sort of pave the way. And you
Mm-hmm.
also, the other key attribute I would say is, not only maintaining focus, but you have to be um, open-minded, and you have to embrace change. This year has been the most cataclysmic in
Mm-hmm.
our all of our
Mm-hmm.
lives, I think, and
Mm-hmm.
the ability to adapt. I've always tried to build dynamic marketing teams that have a really good ability to seize the new technologies and
Yeah.
ways of engaging and growing customers.
Yeah.
But it's a mindset as much as anything else. And so having
Mm-hmm.
that mindset is continually learning, continually growing,
Yeah.
I think really sets you up for career growth. But I think overall, being
Yeah.
intentional about where you want to get to is going to increase your odds of arriving.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. As somebody who completely did not do that, I always respect people that have got to where they are because that's where they intended to be. I mean, you kind of yeah, I mean, we worked together, and you gave me my break into content marketing, and that was something where my career took a change. But yeah, that's really interesting, being intentional, and I also like the idea of adding value as well, and focusing on the value that you can add, because the compensation comes with that, doesn't it? If you worry too much about your title or how much you're getting paid, that's no value to your boss, is it? It's actually what you're contributing.
Well, that's exactly right. And I was at this point in my career in my early 30s, and
Mm-hmm.
I was at one of the companies, not as well known today, Samsung bought them, called AST Computer, but
Yeah.
we were growing from $1 billion to $2 billion. It was a pretty sizable computer operation. At one point, we were number 5 in the world. I've mostly been in software this whole century, but
Yeah.
back in the
Yeah.
90s, I was at this computer company,
Yeah.
and this 38-year-old was designated the president. I thought, wow, 38 years old,
Yeah.
president of a $2 billion company. And I said to him, Jim, how did you get there? Because I'm at a director level, and kind of getting to your levels like somewhere in the horizon. It may never
Yeah.
happen. Like maybe running marketing would be a good idea. And he said, Grant,
Yeah.
I as I was growing in my career here at
Mm-hmm.
ASC Computer, I would look around and say, what are we not doing? What could we do? What are
Yeah.
other companies doing? And I said, let's make that happen. I didn't
Yeah. Yeah.
personally do the work, but I marshaled the resources. And so he
Yeah.
demonstrated this leadership quality that I think set him up for progressive
Mm.
responsibilities. He went from head of sales in the US and then head of sales Europe and sales and service, and eventually became president. And I
Yeah.
always remember that. And, it's advice I've given to others on my team. It's a lot of them will come and say, we got everything done. I said, okay, but what haven't we done?
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's really good advice. It's really good advice. And also, I'd love to, I mean, the time's ticking away, but I'd love to explore more about, I've had conversations about why the CMO doesn't become the CEO. And I think sometimes it's because we don't have that commercial impact on the business that the head of sales has, or the people in the commercial roles. But if I go back, you just mentioned the fact that your career has been B2B, primarily in software and hardware. What do you think is the secret to good B2B marketing, compared to, say, B2C? What do you think we need to focus on as B2B marketers?
Yeah, interesting enough, I actually learned a lot about both B2B and B2C when I was at Toshiba, because we sold to businesses, but we also sold to consumers. And
Yeah.
I launched this consumer notebook for consumer and small business called Satellite, set up an satellite office way back in the early days of connectivity.
Yeah.
And we had a sizable marketing budget, Ian. So I
Yeah.
was fortunate that we had a really good agency. We had Shy a Day. They were up in LA. They'd been Apple's agency during the,
Yeah.
why 1984 won't be like 1984. And I'm sure this predates some of your listeners, so I'm dating myself. I was around in 1984. That's okay. But
I
they
had
had
a
this
Toshiba
wonderful,
Satellite Pro at one point, I
yeah,
think.
exactly. It launched into space somewhere. But what was interesting, they had a very simple test of effective communications.
Mm-hmm.
And I love simplicity. And it was be relevant and distinct. And if you remember the dot-com days that we all suffered through, you could launch a gerbil from a can and on a TV commercial for the Super Bowl, and that was like real interesting, but it really wasn't. It didn't amount to anything. And so it's a simple test. I've kept that as well. Anybody can be distinct, but being relevant. And today, there's all this one-to-one communication and personalization, and obviously you're a content one of the
Yeah.
top experts in that. And if you don't connect, it's not
Yeah.
whether it's snackable
Yeah.
or it's written or video or audio or
Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah.
And so that was really helpful. The other thing that I think for B2B marketing, and I heard this over the last several years as I talked to,
Mm-hmm.
about opportunities with other CMOs or a recruiter, and they'd say, I want
Yeah.
a full stack marketer. I said, so what do you
Yeah.
mean? That's an intro. What do you mean by a full stack? Well,
Yeah.
in the past, like if you were good at brand and communications or if you're good at product marketing,
Yeah.
it's enough. But now
Yeah.
the remit is you've got to be good at everything. And
Yeah.
so the way I look at it is there's like 4 levers. There could be more.
Mm-hmm.
What's called the 4 levers you have as a CMO is you've got to have really effective demand gen and digital. So that's
Mm-hmm.
a key lever to driving,
Mm-hmm.
pipeline and revenue contribution. And you've got to have product marketing. Really,
Yeah.
I call it portfolio marketing. All
Yeah.
the things from pricing, positioning, packaging, promotion.
Yeah.
You've got to have strong, I call it strategic communications.
Mm-hmm.
Influencer management, PR, social, and all that good stuff. And you've got to have great operations. That's sort of the 4th lever. And with the tech stack today, it's just my head wants to explode sometime. Yet another automation solution, another way to optimize my website. But you've got to figure out what works, what doesn't work. Be agile, be iterative, try things out. If it works, great. If it doesn't, stop it.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think that's really key. Is just to maintain that. And then lastly is, well, you can do everything, you can't do everything.
Yeah.
So I've really focused on hiring people like Jeff Clark that we both know. Very talented people that want to step up, want to produce results, want to be measured, right?
Yeah.
Want to set higher bars, and that way I can focus on the more strategic contribution of marketer. It's so easy to get buried, as all of us can, in the day, but you've got to add more value. Again, that theme to the organization. I'm asking the CEO, what else can I do? Right?
Yeah.
They know I'm doing my job. How can I add more value? Even today, I asked that question.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, that's really interesting. I really like the relevant and distinct. That just, with all the buzzwords and bullshit that we're exposed to all the time, just those 2 words just so neatly describe what we need to do as marketers. I talk about awareness, revenue, and growth. Awareness, revenue, and trust, because I think we need to align ourselves to some corporate goals, but being relevant and distinct, man, that's that content marketing right there. I'm gonna steal that completely.
All yours, my friend.
Be inspired by that, not for the first time, Grant, either. Now that's fantastic. There's so much good stuff in there, and I'm gonna move to. I just used the word bullshit. I'm gonna move to my final question, and here on the Rockstar CMO we have a swimming pool. Where we throw all the bullshit, snake oil, and stuff we don't like about our wonderful craft. It's our portal to hell. What would you throw into our portal to hell?
I love that question, and I thought about it for a little bit here, and it just all coalesced around the word attribution. And I can just remember the nightmare conversations I had at the company prior to STL, where we had noted a multi-million-dollar deal that marketing had touched 27 times. Email, webinar, website, download, physical event, you name it. And the CEO said, no, marketing doesn't get credit. I met the CIO 3 years ago. So you can't attribute that to marketing, because if it weren't for him, we would never got the deal. And so I realized at that point it was an epiphany. There's a lot of epiphanies. I think at some point I'll do a lessons learned working for strong CEOs, because that's probably worthwhile. But I'm not going to fight this battle. I'm not going to win against a billionaire. This guy's a billionaire CEO. So I shifted the conversation from attribution to contribution.
Yeah.
And so we've signed up and we're delivering more than 50% contribution at Emburse, together with the BDRs, which qualify all leads. So we work in an integral fashion with them, and obviously with sales and partners. And contribution works much better. And in circling back to a theme I mentioned earlier and how I pick companies, I love our CEO. We're friends. He's a great guy. Get along with him well. He believes in marketing, and he says marketing touches everything. He doesn't want to have an argument about attribution. He says it's like nonsense. He said, you've got AR, you got PR, you got web, you've got webinars, and so, but contribution is the more important thing, and focusing on contribution. It's it's a fool's errand to try to, stand up in front of a group. Somebody's going to shoot you down and it doesn't feel good. Could be the CFO. They're going to say nonsense. What's the ROI of X, Y, or Z? And so focus on contribution, whether it's a small, medium, or large. If you can measure the contribution, the influence on the pipe, moving an opportunity through the funnel, helping sales close. You don't have to actually say we were why it happened. Because the other thing I've learned is you win or fail together. And so I lock arms with the CRO and say, look, if you guys make the quarter, we win. We could do everything great and you guys don't make the quarter, we can't feel good. So I think that's sort of a uniting arms and tying the outcomes to mutual success is important.
Yeah, that's incredibly important. And that is, I hear that advice a lot, and we talk about that a lot here, is about the fact that marketing isn't just some sort of hamster wheel activity that goes on. You have to be locked into growth. Otherwise, you get replaced by the chief growth officer, which is what we've seen right in our craft. So, yeah, I mean, that's a brilliant way to leave it. And I love that. Again, we're getting some really nice pithy advice here. So so the distinct and relevant, and then we need to contribute to that. So I love these keywords that we can pick out from this conversation. It's really good. Well, thank you very much for your time, Grant. I know that you're a very busy man, and thank you for sparing half an hour with us. Where can people find you if they want to hear more about what you think?
Well, they can find me at Grant E. Johnson 1 at LinkedIn. That's probably the best way. Our company's I'm going to be hosting a podcast that we're going to do, but it's kind of a
splendid,
modest start to really just make some of our, customers more available to other customers type thing. But LinkedIn's probably the best way. And it's great catching up and talk with you, and really enjoyed our conversation, Ian.
All right. And I'll include a link to that in the show notes, as well as a link to Emburse as well, which sounds like it makes people's lives much easier, and I'm all in favor of that. So thank you very much for that, Grant.
Yeah, my pleasure. We'll talk again soon.
We will indeed. Thanks, mate. Cheers.
Take care. Bye now.
Bye-bye. Thank you, Grant. So much to pick up on there. I'll definitely be stealing some of that good stuff. Right, it's Friday evening here at the Rockstar CMO Penthouse in London. Time to round off the week with a cocktail in the virtual Rockstar CMO bar with my friend and content marketing guru, Robert Rose. Good evening, Robert. What are you drinking?
Oh, hello, my friend. Funny that you should meet me here.
I know. I was just passing. I'm on my way home.
It's almost like this is a regular segment or something. Tonight, I have to tell you, I am so sick of politics. I am.
Really?
Oh my God. As we approach the election here and the debates, I'm tired. I'm tired of all of it. So tonight I have what I'm drinking So are you familiar with the concept of the In-N-Out burger?
Yes, absolutely. I lived in the US for a while. They're famous.
All right. So for those in your European audience that may not know, the In-N-Out burger is a very, very famous hamburger joint here in the US, primarily, and started here in Southern California. And they have what they call the double-double. Of course, it's double everything on a hamburger. It's hey, hashtag America. So
I was going to say
that's the way we roll here. And so this I'm calling the double-double because I could use it tonight with all this politics here. And it's basically a very simple drink. I think you're probably going to be able to do this in your bar. It is literally a double shot of whatever your favorite liquor is. And of course, mine is tequila. So it's literally 2 shots of tequila and by the way, but 2 shots in 2 glasses. So there's your double-double.
Right.
So 2 shots in 2 glasses. So you end up with 4 shots there, and just a little pinch of salt in there just for taking it down, and maybe a squeeze of lime if you're really ambitious. But basically, just straight up. You know what I mean? Just
simple is good. Let me see what I've got here. So All right. So you said my favorite liquor that I can use. Well, I'm going to go for the closest because that's all I've got on my desk, and that is some Hendrick's gin. How about that?
Yes.
Right. So I don't have a measure, actually. I just have the bottle here in a glass.
Just pour until the glass is half full, pretty much.
Oh, there you go. Splendid. And because of the nature of this program, and I don't want to disappoint the listeners, I am going to have to put ice in that.
Yeah. Oh, well, you can put some ice in there if you want. Yeah.
And, of course, some tonic.
Well, I think you could skip the tonic this week, my friend, but, do what you need to do.
I replace salt with tonic.
Fair enough.
Fair enough. I only put a tiny pinch of tonic in it, though. If that's
all right. All right. I mean, you could have gone with the martini, but
Oh my gosh, that's quite a lot of gin. Yes, that's very nice. Very nice. And
you will redouble your efforts on the very nice after you've had the first one, and then the second one goes down even smoother.
And I think by that point I will be as numb to politics as I think you want to be.
Exactly. This is yes.
So as we're good, polite gentlemen anyway, we never talk politics or religion in sociable company. So what would we be talking? What the first thing is, where are we going to be when we have this conversation?
Well, here we are in the thick of the fall season. And you know what I miss? I miss a good English rain. I really do.
Wow.
And so I know. For you, I know. For me here in Southern California, it is, we don't get rain here like that. And so, and we really haven't gotten, any rain of measurable quantity since really February. And so I miss, sort of that nice sound of rain on the roof. Yeah. And so I think we have to go somewhere in the English countryside. And I would leave it to you to direct us to the right place, but not London per se, but the English countryside somewhere. I think we need to be listening to it rain and sort of sitting in front of a warm fire and just drinking and not talking about politics.
I think if we're on the mainland and you want rain, I think Wales is the place to be. Yeah, I think there's some very.
I have never been to Wales, and I would love to go.
Yeah. There's parts of Wales are just beautiful. In the mid Wales with the valleys and the lakes and the rain. That was where I spent a lot of my childhood holidays. So
is in Wales?
Yeah. My parents are big fans of the walking and the waterfalls and the lakes and all that kind of good stuff. So I'm very familiar with that, and I'm very familiar with doing all those things in the rain.
There we go.
So that sounds wonderful. So we're tucked away in a nice bar. Drinking neat liquor, trying to avoid the politics. What are we actually going to talk about then, Robert?
Well, it's something that it came up the other day for me, and it was interesting. I was talking with a client, and it's this idea that we often can't see success for the failure. And what I mean by that is what, there's this question we often ask ourselves, right? Like here's an example. How many visitors to our content will be enough to provide the ROI, right? And so you're probably going, all right, well, what do you mean? What goals? Who is it that's visiting? Which content? Was it our website, our blog, our sales sheet? And the answer to those are, you can't answer it, right? You even if I tell you the right visitor, the right content, the current goals, you still don't know the exact answer to that question of how many will be enough, because you only understand the conditions as they exist today, right? In other words, well, even if you know that the right visitor is this and the right content is that, and this is the current goal, well, how much is it going to cost those visitors tomorrow versus today? Does it stay, does the conversion rate stay the same? Will next month's visitors? And so what we end up with is sort of in those overwhelming sort of moments is answering more, You know what I mean? I don't
Yeah.
know. The answer is more. I need more than it is today. And, it reminds me very much of, and I've even, I even called it this when I talked to my client, which is I called it the Yahoo effect, right? Because, Yahoo, whatever it was let's call it 4 years ago, it's 2016, right? 2015, 2016. And so during that time, that's when Marissa Mayer was the CEO. And so they made this big bet, this big content marketing bet, right? And basically they launched these digital magazines. And they brought in all these heavy hitter journalists. They had David Pogue. They had this fashion styles guy, guru. And basically in less than a year, the Yahoo grew those 7 magazines and one of them, the parenting magazine, had 17 million unique visitors per month, right? 5 of the 7 had more than 10 million unique visitors per month. And what did they do? They shut them all down. And so, right, if I came to you and I said, here's what I'm going to give you, Ian, today. I'm going to give you a digital magazine. I'm going to give you tech editor David Pogue. He's from the Wall Street Journal, obviously, and has been around a million years. I'm going to give you David Pogue to be the editor of it. I'm going to give you proper writers and journalists. I'm going to give you technology to run it. I'm going to give you 17 million unique visitors per month. You think you can make a go of that? You think you could make a business out of that? And your answer is like, of course I can. Well, they couldn't. And why not? And the reason is because at the time, Yahoo was getting 180 million uniques per month.
Right.
And so they looked at that and said, how many do we need? Well, we need more because quite frankly, we can't sell advertising against such a small number. Wow. And of course, in hindsight, we go, that's ridiculous. You should have just right-sized that business. You should have figured out what you were doing with those audiences. You should have figured out, there was so many opportunities that you missed. But in the real time, our answer is we don't know enough about the future. All we can do is measure ourselves against today, and it feels like we need more. And my client was looking at exactly that when we started talking about their business, and I said, what's going on in your business? And he said, well, we've got this wonderful blog and we're getting about 100,000 visitors per month. And I said, okay, tell me what the problem is, because I don't see a problem. And he said, well, our website gets millions of views. And I'm like, all right, but that's different. You're a B2C company and, blah, blah, blah. You're well known in the marketplace and all of that. I said, your blog's getting 100,000. I said, what's happening with those visitors? Well, nothing really. We're only converting a few of them to subscribers. And we're only converting a few of them over to traffic to our shopping e-commerce site, blah, blah, blah. I said, well, what do you think the problem is? And he said, well, we just need more. We need more audiences. We need, I don't know, we need to advertise. I said, no. I said, you've got a much more interesting challenge, which is, what are you doing with the 100,000 that you're getting?
Yes.
Why are you not doing? And he's like, oh, right. And the only reason he couldn't see that wasn't because he's not a smart guy, because he was a really smart guy. But the reason he couldn't see that is because when he compares it to what he knows today, which is having 1 million visitors to their e-commerce site, 100,000 doesn't sound like a lot. And so you go, I need more. I don't know what I need, but I need more, because if I get more, then I'll win. And that's the mistake. And it's such a classic mistake that I see, which is, how many do we need is not, the answer isn't more necessarily. It might be more, but we need to look deeper and further into that.
Oh, I love that. I love that, because I think it also applies not just to your, big B2C client. It applies to what we do on social media as individuals, doesn't it? It's like, what does success look like when you start your blog or start this podcast, or, what does success look like for me for Rockstar CMO? And you're always suckered into this hustle culture that it has to be more. And maybe it doesn't have to be more. Maybe you just serve the audience that you have really well, and you get a much deeper engagement. And that's actually the more.
Yes, that's exactly right. I mean, and it's basically understanding what success looks like. You said it very well, right? It's really understanding, what does success look like?
Yeah. And
then shooting for that, rather than just assuming that it needs to look like everything else in its category, right?
Yeah.
And that we can get caught in that trap, because we compare ourselves to ourselves and others that we can see that are corollaries, right?
Yeah.
And, for us that have blogs or for us that have podcasts, we look at success and we go, it's Joe Rogan, right? Joe Rogan's success, making $100 million as a podcaster and audiences of millions, et cetera, et cetera. That was success for him. But success for us as a podcaster, maybe just quite frankly, getting one sponsor who can fund this thing in a way that doesn't make me go broke. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I love doing it, right? And
I'm at the
clear about that success.
Yeah, I'm at the level of it gives me an excuse to talk to interesting people. I've not gone much further than that at the moment with my goals.
It could be a perfectly monetizable goal, right? It absolutely could be a perfectly monetizable goal because it could fuel other things. This is what Jay Baer used to talk about. He used to talk about his podcast serving as a business development tool. As he said, interview your potential customers.
Yeah.
He said, his whole goal with his podcast was to go out and interview potential clients and basically interview them and hear what made them tick and become connected with them in a way that made them want to become a client.
Yeah, I should give that a go.
The whole monetization thing, like thinking about that,
or planning stuff. Was and I was actually having a conversation with a client I've started advising, and they were talking about this in terms of their pipeline as well, in terms of the top of funnel. And you know how those conversations go. They just think they need more in the top of funnel, and then you talk to them about, well, what do you actually need at the bottom of the funnel? How many people do you actually need to convert to become part of your community, to become a buyer, and they're like, oh, we just need this. I'm like, well, then you don't actually need that many. You just need more of these people to be engaged. So find that tribe. Don't just try and be something to everybody, because those people will never convert.
That's right. That's exactly right. And it's often the trap that we fall into when we have a blog that starts to work or a publication that starts to work, starts to get some traffic from the right audience, and then somebody goes, oh my God, well, if it works for this audience, we should expand it out to this other audience and this other audience. And now all of a sudden you're trying to address 3 or 4 audiences with the same publication, and all of a sudden it doesn't work for anybody, right?
No. That's right. And you just it's like any artist, isn't it? When they try and become commercial, they lose a bit of their art, and it's a little bit like that, isn't it? If you start chasing the number, then you're going to become a popularist, and when you become popularist, you're of interest to fewer people, really, aren't you?
Yeah, I think that's largely true. I think there are ways to, there are ways, I believe, and I'm literally thinking about this in real time. But it feels like, how about that there are ways that you can become popularist, but also maintain a certain level of unique voice. To put it into the movie sort of business, there are ways that you can start out making art films and ultimately become Steven Spielberg without losing your identity, I guess.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I think, what people, directors or storytellers, if you think like a Steven Spielberg or George Lucas or, anybody who would be considered making sort of the pop music of movies or the pop music of whatever, or the pop music of pop music, right? I think there's a way to retain your voice and not look like quote unquote a sellout, or not lose your success by expanding out to a wider and wider audience. You just have to figure out a very distinct voice within that wider audience. And that's the hard part, right? I mean, Spielberg is really difficult because he's enormously talented at that popularized voice.
That's a good point. And it also, I mean, the point I was thinking about there about becoming distinct and becoming different, I think you've talked about this before, is that in order to do that, you need to be prepared that other people won't like you. To be really liked, then you need to be prepared for the fact that people won't like you.
Well, and that's staying true to the voice, right? Yeah, that's staying true to the voice.
Yeah, but that doesn't really work in the Steven Spielberg model, because there's very few people on this planet that don't like what he does, right? So kind of
but
works
there are,
against.
right? There are people who think he's a hack and think that, his movies are too sugary sweet and, and don't like his movies as a result of that, and
it's true.
Look at something like E.T. or, or Close Encounters and go, oh, it should have been this kind of movie, or Jurassic Park and say, oh, it didn't meet the darkness of the novel. The novel was so much more dark and realistic. And he's, he made sort of the theme park ride of that. And it's like, he did. He has a voice and he used it. And too bad you didn't like it.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. And so that's fantastic. Thank you very much. I forgot to ask you again. We do this every week, right? And I've got it completely wrong this time around in terms of the order of things. What was it we were drinking again? Because I didn't ask you to name the drink again.
I told you it was the double double. And you've already met the requirements of the double double, which of course, so, forget about what the hell you were thinking about. Yeah.
The double. And oh yes, of course. And you've spent the week this week in the virtual world of content marketing world. How did your keynote go?
Yes, we had a wonderful event.
Yeah.
I mean, it was, I would not be truthful if I didn't say I missed the physical event and the virtual event was everything the physical. It wasn't. I mean, the virtual event was the virtual event, and I absolutely missed the physical experience, and I don't believe that there's anything that's going to replace that.
No.
And so in the future, does that look like a hybrid thing? Maybe. I kind, if I'm again honest, I don't care. I don't care that much about the hybrid thing. What I care about is it is a one physical experience that I truly value in my life, and I miss it. I miss being in London. I miss being in Amsterdam. I miss being in Ireland. I miss being in New York. I miss being in Cleveland. And seeing people that I love and seeing people that I respect and listening to them and getting to interact and have that human connection. And virtual is great, and there's definitely a place for it, and there's absolutely a value in it, but it's not the same.
And I think if I point my listeners to, it was a couple of episodes ago where you and Joe were reminiscing about your experiences at Content Marketing World, and they're all so wonderfully poignant, and that you couldn't do that virtually. When Joe was talking about walking out on stage the first time, and there was a tear in his eye and stuff like that. I guess you don't get that on Zoom.
Can you imagine? Oh, Ian, 2 years ago when I clicked on the new meeting in Zoom and saw your face for the first time, it was truly like magic to see me, to tell you that you were on mute and to ask you to unmute yourself. I'll never forget that moment.
They're the memories for our children that we shall share in future podcasts. Oh, that time you were on mute. Oh.
Yeah.
Well, that's fantastic. Thank you, and congratulations on a great event this week.
Thank you.
And I think people can still catch up with it, can't they? Can they, if they were registered, they can still watch some of the videos and stuff from the event.
The one nice thing about the virtual thing is that it lasts, right? So we are making the content available for 6 months to those who register for the event. So there's lots to binge watch and lots to go through, from workshops to sessions to the keynotes and everything in between.
Splendid. And that's on contentmarketingworld.com.
That's correct.
All right. And what if people want to hear more from you, Robert, and they spin the dial on the interwebs? Where would they find you?
Already. If you're a glutton for punishment and want to hear more from me, social media, you can always get me at Robert_.Rose on the Twitter, LinkedIn. You can find me with a search, and of course the website is contentadvisory.net. That's
splendid. Thank you very much, Robert. And will I see you in the bar next week?
You will, I'm sure. Or you will.
Thank you very much, Robert. Speak to you soon, mate. Cheers. Thanks again to Robert. So that's a wrap on episode 32 of the Rockstar CMO effing marketing podcast. Thanks again to Grant for the conversation, to Robert for the inspiring cocktail, and to the wonderful bloggers that have nourished my mornings this week. I will, of course, include links to Robert and Grant in the show notes that you can find at rockstarcmo.com/podcast. But most of all, thank you for dropping a dime into your podcasting jukebox, selecting our track and jiving along with us. I hope you enjoyed the show. If you like my guests, please give them a mention, click their links, follow them, and take a look at their work. I really appreciate their time. So please, show them some love and tell them I sent you. So does the world need another effing marketing podcast? I would love to know what you think. Drop us some feedback, a review, subscribe, share, or just keep listening. I'm glad you're here. Next week, I again use this podcast as an excuse to grab a conversation with someone I found interesting, and I take a trip, virtual of course, into London agency land, as I have a chat with Sabrina Chavans, founder of Complex Creative, who was inducted to Mensa at 5, has degrees in medicine and economics, and I think my first question will be, why marketing? And I will again, hopefully, find my friend Robert Rose in our virtual Rockstar CMO bar. Until then, I've been your host, Ian Truscott, founding editor of rockstarcmo.com, and I hope you'll again join us next week here at Rockstar CMO FM.
You may know you're listening to this show along the Marketing Podcast Network, but did you know there are other great shows on MPN to help your business? Christy Heiler hosts a fantastic podcast called Own It. Christy, tell us more about the show.
Own It is all about celebrating women and non-binary advertising agency owners. We talk about buying out of the boys' club of advertising because less than 1% of ad agencies are owned by women.
And where can people subscribe?
You can find the podcast at untilyouownit.com. We're also on the Marketing Podcast Network at marketingpodcast.net. And of course, you can subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.
You heard her. Go subscribe. This podcast is heard along the Marketing Podcast Network. For more great marketing podcasts, visit marketingpodcasts.net.